10 years ago, Lucian Vale knelt before a silver ring and a heart untouched by betrayal. 10 years later, he's a name the underworld dares not utter aloud. And she, Serafina, is still on the run from the ghost of the man she thought had chosen to kill her. When an explosion rips through the quiet street and Lucian rushes into the flames not to save anyone, but because he sees the silver ring dangling around her neck. The ring he gave her. The ring he thought he'd lost forever. Like and comment the name of the city you're watching to let me know how far this story has come. Don't go anywhere. This is a story you can't miss. The ring was still there. Lucian Vale saw it before he saw anything else. A flash of silver catching the firelight, swinging from a thin chain around a woman's neck as she stumbled out of the smoke with a boy pressed against her chest. His brain registered the shape in under a second. The oval bezel, the thin hammered band, the small nick on the left side where he dropped it on pavement the morning he bought it, 23 years old and stupid enough to believe love was something that lasted. He recognized that ring before he recognized her face. His driver was already pulling him back by the arm. "Mr. Vale, the car!" Lucian walked forward. The street outside Serafina's flower shop had come apart 12 minutes earlier. The blast had blown the front window clean out of its frame, scattered carnations and ribbon wire across 2 lanes of traffic, and caved the front awning in at a 40-degree angle. 2 bystanders were down on the sidewalk. Someone was screaming from inside a parked delivery truck. Emergency sirens were still 3, maybe 4 minutes out. Lucian had been in this neighborhood long enough to know that the response time in Garrow Street was always 4 minutes longer than everywhere else because nobody important enough to complain lived here. Nobody except her, apparently. He pushed through the smoke. The heat hit him first. Not a wall of it, but a creeping, mean thing that worked its way under his collar and into his lungs before he'd taken 5 steps. Behind him, he could hear Marcus calling his name, hear the crunch of a second car door opening, hear his security team scrambling to keep up with a man who had spent a decade making every move calculated and had just abandoned every calculation because of a piece of silver the size of a thumbnail. He found her on her knees in the rubble of her own doorway. She had the boy behind her, her body between him and the still smoking interior, her palms bleeding from where she'd caught herself on the broken glass. Her hair was down and full of ash. Her left shoulder was bleeding through a cream-colored blouse. She was talking to the boy in a low-level voice that had no business being that steady, telling him, "Don't look. Keep your eyes on me. I've got you." Lucian stopped 3 feet from her. She looked up. 10 years collapsed in the space of one breath. Serafina Ashcroft's face had changed the way a landscape changes after a long drought, still recognizable in its bones, but harder in ways that had nothing to do with age. The softness he remembered around her jaw was gone. Her eyes were the same, a green so dark it read as brown in low light. But what lived behind them now was something carved, something that had learned how to make itself very small and very quiet for a very long time. She looked at him the way a person looks at something they have practiced not looking at. "Get away from us," she said. Her voice was flat. No tremor, no surprise. Just the cold, immediate reflex of a woman who had decided, at some point in the last decade, that Lucian Vale approaching her was a threat equal to any fire. The boy, Rowan, she'd said his name when she was talking him down. "Rowan, stay with me," peered around her shoulder. He was maybe 9, dark hair, serious eyes. Something in the set of his jaw was familiar in a way Lucian's mind didn't immediately pursue because it was already too busy processing everything else. "You're bleeding," Lucian said. "I'm aware." "The building's going to—" The groan of metal above them settled the argument. A section of the awning buckled and came down 6 feet to their left, and Serafina flinched but didn't move, kept herself between the debris and the boy with the practiced reflex of someone who had been doing exactly this, putting her body between her child and the world, for years. Lucian moved before she could object. He got his arm around her and got Rowan's wrist in his other hand and moved them both backward, out of the doorway, into the open air of the street, and Serafina fought him every step of the way. An elbow into his ribs, a sharp pull of her arm, a get-off-me that came out through gritted teeth. But she didn't stop moving because she was smart enough to understand the awning was coming down whether she liked him or not. They cleared it by 4 seconds. The second section of awning hit the doorframe with a sound like a gunshot and sent a cloud of dust and ash rolling across the sidewalk. Rowan pressed his face against his mother's neck. Serafina stood rigid in Lucian's loosened grip, and the moment she felt his hand leave her arm, she stepped away and turned and put the boy directly behind her again. She was still wearing the ring around her neck. It had come loose from her collar in the scramble, and it hung there in the open now, catching the ugly orange light of the fire behind them, and Lucian could not stop looking at it. She noticed where his eyes had gone. Something moved across her face, not surprise, not grief, something older and harder than either of those. Her hand came up and closed around the ring, and she tucked it back beneath her collar with a deliberate, private motion that was clearly not the first time she'd done it. A practiced concealment, like something she'd been hiding for years. Sarah. His own voice surprised him. He hadn't said her name out loud in a long time. He'd stopped letting himself somewhere around year 3 when the private investigators had come back the 5th time with nothing. Don't. She looked at him directly. Whatever you came here to say, don't. I didn't come here to say anything. I was passing through. Then keep passing. The sirens arrived. 2 fire trucks and an ambulance pushed into the far end of the street, and the small crowd that had gathered on the opposite sidewalk began moving and rearranging itself. Marcus appeared at Lucian's shoulder, big man, 20 years in the organization, a face that showed nothing, and spoke quietly into his ear. We need to go, sir. This area is going to be locked down in 6 minutes. Not yet. Marcus did not argue. Marcus had learned not to argue about certain things. Serafina was already pulling Rowan away, moving along the sidewalk with the focused efficiency of a woman who had an exit route for every situation. The boy looked back once. His eyes met Lucian's and held there for a second longer than a child normally holds a stranger's gaze. Direct, unafraid, evaluating. And then Serafina said his name, and he turned and they kept moving. Lucian watched them go. Then he turned to Marcus. Who owns the property next to her shop? Marcus blinked. Sir? The building on the left. The one that's still standing. Find out who owns it, who's been watching it, and whether that blast was shaped. He looked back at the burning shop front. The fire department was pulling hose now. A paramedic had intercepted Serafina on the sidewalk 20 yards down, and she was standing still for it, letting them look at her shoulder while keeping one hand on Rowan's head. The angle was wrong for a gas line, too centered. You think it was targeted? It wasn't a question. Marcus knew him well enough to know that when Lucian Vale stopped in the middle of a street and made a call about an explosion, he wasn't guessing. Find out where she lives, Lucian said. Quietly. He said it quietly himself, and it came out the way most of his orders came out, without inflection, without visible weight. And if there was anything underneath it that resembled the feeling a man gets when he holds something he lost for 10 years and then has to put it back down, he did not let it reach his face. He walked back to the car. His offices were on the 42nd floor of a building that carried a financial consulting firm's name on the outside and something else entirely on the inside. The city spread below the windows like a circuit board, orderly from a distance, chaotic at every intersection. Lucian stood at the glass with a glass of water he hadn't touched and watched the lights, and waited for the particular brand of stillness that came after his mind had finished running the numbers. It wasn't coming tonight. He reached into the inside breast pocket of his jacket. The ring was there, had been there for 10 years, transferred to every new jacket, every suit, every coat with the same automatic motion he used to transfer his phone and his keys. He didn't take it out. He just confirmed its weight with his fingers and then took his hand away. He'd bought it at a pawn shop on Mercer Street, which wasn't romantic but was honest, which was more than he could say for most of what came after. He'd been 23 and working 3 jobs and saving the difference, and he'd seen it in the case and known, with the particular unreasoned certainty of someone who hasn't yet learned to be cautious, that it was the right one. The woman behind the counter had said it was Victorian. He didn't know if that was true. He'd paid what she asked and walked out into the November cold and stood on the sidewalk for 5 minutes with his hands shaking. He hadn't been afraid of much since, but he'd been afraid that morning. He'd never gotten the chance to be afraid of the proposal itself, because 3 days later, everything had fallen apart. A phone call that didn't sound right, a meeting that ran long, a door to her apartment that didn't open when his key met the lock. By the time he understood what was happening, she was already gone, and the man who was supposed to be his uncle's most trusted advisor was standing in his kitchen telling him that Serafina Ashcroft had taken $20,000 from a man named Thorne and given information about the Vale family's financial structure to people who wanted to use it. He hadn't believed it at first. Then the documents came. Then the photographs. Then Cassian Thorne himself had sat across a table from him and laid out the evidence with the measured, sorrowful tone of a man delivering difficult news he wished he didn't have to deliver. Lucian had gone very quiet and very cold and stayed that way. The following year was the worst of his life, and not because of what happened to his heart, which he put somewhere deep and walled over and mostly forgot about, but because of what he had to do to hold the Vale organization together through a succession war that killed 11 people, including his father, and nearly killed him twice. When it was over, he was 30 and in command of everything and had the ring in his pocket and no particular plans to take it out. He'd looked for her. He'd used resources most people didn't know he had, and she had still been impossible to find, which told him something. Told him she was either very good at hiding or had help from someone who was. And either answer made the story Cassian had told him feel a little less clean, a little less settled, a little more like something he should have pulled apart at the seams years ago. He hadn't let himself pull it apart. He'd filed it under things that didn't matter anymore and tried to leave it there. Then she walked out of a burning building wearing his ring. His phone buzzed. Marcus, Serafina Ashcroft. Flower shop on Garrow Street, operating for 4 years under the name Meridian Blooms. Prior address? 3 different cities in 6 years. Before that, nothing traceable. The boy is 9 years old. Birth certificate lists father as unknown. Lucian read that last line twice. Father unknown. He set the phone face down on the desk and stood very still for a moment. Then he picked it back up and typed. The blast. What do we know? The response came in under 2 minutes, which meant Marcus had already been working it. Forensics will take time, but the shape of the damage is consistent with a directed charge, not military grade. Someone who knows what they're doing but isn't showing off. Primary target appears to be the interior of the shop rather than the street. If she'd been inside, Lucian stopped reading. If she'd been inside. He thought about Rowan's face, that unreadable, direct stare. He thought about the particular stubborn set of Serafina's jaw when she'd put herself between her child and the falling debris. The same way she'd once put herself between Lucian and a man with a broken bottle in a bar they'd had no business being in, back when she thought he was just a reckless kid who couldn't stay out of trouble. He thought about the ring beneath her collar. Find out who built that device, he typed, and find out what she has that someone wants badly enough to blow up a flower shop. He stood at the window for a long time after that. The city below him did not care about any of it. It had its own business to conduct, its own violence to manage, its own debts coming due. Somewhere in it, Serafina was in an emergency room, or a police precinct, or back in her apartment with the door locked and her son asleep and whatever she carried, whatever she'd been carrying for 10 years, pressing down on her in the dark. He had built an empire on his ability to read situations accurately and act without hesitation. He had learned the hard way that the most dangerous thing a man in his position could do was let something personal cloud the calculation. He was very aware that what he was planning to do next was personal. He picked up his jacket, reached into the pocket without thinking, confirmed the weight. Still there. He put the jacket on and walked out. Oh, she didn't answer the first knock, or the second. He knew she was home. He could see the light under the door, could hear the television inside at low volume, could hear the small sounds of a child being settled for the night. He also knew she'd looked through the peephole because the light in the hall had shifted for a second, a small disturbance in the line along the bottom of the door, and then gone still. He waited. The door opened on a chain. One green eye looked at him through the gap. "You followed me home," she said. "Yes." "I could call the police." "You won't." The eye stayed fixed on him. He watched her decide something, watched the quality of her stillness change in a way he would not have been able to describe to anyone who hadn't spent considerable time learning to read her face, which was something he had done at 22 and apparently hadn't fully unlearned. The chain came off. She stood in the doorway with her shoulder bandaged and her arms crossed, and the ring back under her collar where he couldn't see it. Behind her, the apartment was small and clean and organized in the specific way of someone who has moved enough times to know exactly what's essential. Nothing extra, nothing that couldn't be packed fast. "Rowan's asleep," she said. Not an invitation, a boundary. "I'm not here about Rowan." Something flickered across her face at the boy's name in his mouth. She recalibrated it fast. "Then what?" "Someone tried to kill you tonight," Lucian said. "And it wasn't random." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she stepped back from the door, not wide, just enough. He walked in. The apartment smelled like cut flowers and something she'd been cooking earlier. Garlic, maybe. Something simple. A child's drawing was held to the refrigerator with a magnet. A pair of small sneakers sat by the door. The television was on a nature channel with the sound turned to near nothing, footage of something large moving through tall grass. Serafina stayed on the far side of the small kitchen table. Her arms were still crossed. She watched him take in the space, and her expression said clearly that she didn't like him being in it. "Say what you came to say." "I think whoever built that device was looking for something you have. Documents, records, something from before you disappeared." Her breathing changed. Almost nothing. A slight tightening of her jaw, a shallowing. Someone who didn't know how to read her would have missed it. He didn't miss it. "You know what I'm talking about," he said. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sarah." "Stop saying my name like that." "Like what?" "Like you have any right to it." The air in the kitchen went tight. He could hear the television from the other room. He could hear the refrigerator hum. He could hear his own blood moving. "I'm going to ask you something," he said carefully, "and I need you to tell me the truth." Her chin came up a fraction. Old reflex, old defiance. He had loved that reflex once. "The night you left," he said. "What happened?" The color in her face shifted. "Not much. Enough." "Nothing happened," she said. "I left." "You took $20,000. Her eyes went flat. "Is that what they told you?" "I saw the records." "You saw what someone wanted you to see." The words came out level, without emphasis, without drama. Not the tone of someone making a defense, but the tone of someone stating a fact they had made their peace with a long time ago because they'd given up expecting to be believed. Something in Lucian's chest moved in a way it hadn't moved in years. "Who?" he said. She looked at him. Really looked at him, for the first time since the fire. Not the managed, defended look she'd been giving him since he knocked, but something underneath that, something that had been waiting behind the wall with a great deal of patience. "You already know who," she said quietly. "You just didn't want to." Lucian stood very still. The name that formed in his mind was one he had trusted, one he had built everything on, one that had been at his right hand for 10 years and had offered every comfort and every resource and every explanation he needed at every moment when the alternative was falling apart. Cassian Thorne. "He sent people," Serafina said. Her voice was still level, but something had come into it now. Not tears, nothing like that, something harder. The sound of a woman reciting a history she has recited to herself so many times it has become factual and bloodless. "2 of them. To the apartment. The night before you were going to propose." "I didn't know about the proposal. I found that out much later." She paused. "They didn't come to hurt me. They came to tell me that if I didn't disappear, they would hurt you. That Cassian had the votes in your father's organization to have you removed, killed. They used that word. They were very specific." She stopped. Lucian did not move. "I didn't take money from anyone," she said. "I took a bus ticket and a change of clothes and I left because I thought it was the only way to keep you alive. And then I found out I was pregnant, and then I thought—" She stopped again. Something shifted in her jaw. "I thought if Cassian wanted me gone that badly, the last thing I should do was contact you about a child. So I didn't." The refrigerator hummed. The television murmured. Lucian looked at her across the small table in the small kitchen of the small apartment she had built her whole life inside, and understood that he had wasted 10 years grieving a betrayal that never happened, and that the man who had handed him that grief had been eating dinner at his table every other Thursday for a decade. His hands were completely still at his sides. "Is Rowan mine?" he said. The question fell between them like something dropped from a great height. Serafina looked at him, and she did not answer, because from the hallway behind her, in the open doorway of a room with a nightlight on, stood a small boy in pajamas who had clearly not been asleep at all, who was looking at Lucian with those dark, serious, familiar eyes, and who said, in a voice rough with almost sleep, "Mom, who is he?" Rowan stood in the hallway doorway with his hair messed from the pillow and his eyes carrying the particular sharp quality of a child who had heard more than the adults meant him to hear. He was holding the door frame with one hand. His feet were bare on the cold floor. He looked at Lucian the way he'd looked at him on the street. That straight, unhurried assessment that had no business living in a 9-year-old's face. "Mom," he said again. "Who is he?" Serafina turned. The movement was controlled, but Lucian could see the cost of it in the set of her shoulders, in the half-second before she got her expression arranged. "Someone I used to know," she said. "Go back to bed. There was an explosion today." "I know. I was there." "Bed." Rowan looked at her. Then he looked at Lucian again. Then he looked at his mother's bandaged shoulder with the matter-of-fact solemnity of a kid who has had to process bad things before and has developed a system for it. "Are you okay?" he said to her. "I'm fine." "You always say that." "Because I'm always fine." "Rowan." Something moved through the boy's face, a small, tired resignation that was too old for him. He looked at Lucian one more time, direct and unashamed, and then he turned and went back down the hall, and the nightlight made a thin line of yellow under his door. The apartment went quiet. Serafina stood with her back to Lucian for a moment. When she turned, her face had been reorganized, not cold, not warm, just closed in the specific way of someone who has made a decision. "You need to leave," she said. "He's mine." "You need to leave, Lucian. Say it." He kept his voice very quiet. "Look at me and tell me he's not." She looked at him. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes were doing something complicated that she was working to simplify. "What I need to tell you," she said finally, "is that you showing up here tonight does not fix 10 years. It does not fix anything. And whatever you think you're owed, I don't think I'm owed anything. You cannot walk into this apartment and start making decisions about my son's life based on one conversation and a theory about a bomb. It's not a theory. It's not proven." "Sarah." He said her name deliberately, the way she'd told him not to, and watched her absorb the impact of it. "Someone built a device and positioned it to detonate inside your shop during business hours. That is not random. And if Cassian Thorne is behind it, and every instinct I have says he is, then staying here isn't safe for you or for Rowan, and we both know it." She turned away from him, went to the window. The city outside was doing what it always did. Lights, movement, the low, indifferent roar of traffic. And she looked at it with her arms wrapped around herself and her bandaged shoulder angled toward him like something she was trying to protect. "You don't know it's him," she said. "You have a name I gave you. I have a name that fits every piece of this puzzle I've been trying to solve for 10 years. And if you're wrong, then I'm wrong and we figure it out. But if I'm right and you stay here, don't." She turned back. Her voice had gone sharp. "Don't finish that sentence like you're the one who gets to weigh the risks for us. I've been keeping him safe for 9 years without you. Don't walk into my house and act like that changes because you showed up." The words landed where she intended them to. He didn't flinch, but he felt them. "You're right," he said. She blinked. She'd been ready for him to push back. "You kept him safe," he said. "I'm not arguing that. I'm saying that whatever you did before tonight, the situation changed tonight. The people who want what you have know where you live now. They know your face, your shop, your street. You've been running for 9 years and you're very good at it, but running is different when someone's already burned down your starting point." She looked at him. He looked back. The refrigerator hummed. "What do I have?" she said quietly. "You said they want something I have. I think you know." She was quiet for a moment, then, "The files." He waited. Her jaw worked. She looked at the window again, then back. "When Cassian's men came to my apartment, the night they told me to run, I wasn't alone when they arrived. I was in the middle of scanning some documents, financial records. I don't know what they meant. I didn't know then. I had a habit of holding on to things. Information. I grew up poor, Lucian. Information was currency even before I knew what that meant. She stopped. I took what I had on the drive with me because it was already in my bag. I've moved it 6 times. I've never opened most of it. What's on it? I don't know exactly. Account numbers, transfer records, routing codes I don't understand, some correspondence between names I've never heard. How long before the separation did you pull those files? She thought. 2 weeks, maybe. Who gave them to you? I worked for a financial management firm. They were client files. I wasn't supposed to have them. She paused. I think someone left them somewhere I could find them. I think it was deliberate. At the time, I thought I'd just been careless about what I scanned. She stopped. Now I think I was set up to take them. Lucian's mind moved through the implications the way it moved through all high-stakes information, fast, sequential, without sentiment. If someone planted those files on you 2 weeks before Cassian's people came to your apartment, he said slowly, then the timing isn't coincidental. Someone wanted those files out of Cassian's reach, wanted them held somewhere he couldn't access, somewhere he'd have to search for. I've been the hiding place, she said. For 10 years, I've been a filing cabinet. Her voice didn't break. That almost made it worse. Where's the drive? He said. She looked at him steadily. Not here. He nodded. He hadn't expected otherwise. I need to make some calls tonight, he said. I need to know what Cassian's been doing in the last 6 months, what he's been spending, who he's been talking to, whether there's been any movement in the shell structures he uses. He paused. And I need you and Rowan somewhere safe tomorrow morning. I'm not going to your compound. I have other properties. I'm not going anywhere with you. He looked at her. She looked back. The stubbornness in her was real and old, and he had always respected it even when it frustrated him, because it was the same quality that had kept her alive and her son hidden for 9 years, against odds that would have broken most people. Then go somewhere you choose, he said. Tonight. Don't stay here. Take Rowan and go somewhere you haven't been before, somewhere with no connection to your name, and call me in the morning. He set a card on her kitchen table, not his personal number, a clean line, one of 6 he rotated. That number is secure. She looked at the card but didn't pick it up. Lucian. Her voice had changed. Something in it had come loose, very slightly, like a single thread working free from a knot. I need you to hear me when I say this. I didn't leave because I wanted to. I didn't leave because I stopped. She stopped herself, recalibrated. I made the only choice I could make with what I knew at the time, and I have spent 9 years being right about that choice. So don't stand in my kitchen and look at me like I owe you an apology. He was quiet for a moment. I'm not looking at you like that, he said. Then what are you looking at me like? He didn't answer. He picked up his jacket from the chair where he'd laid it, reached into the pocket without thinking, confirmed the weight of the ring with 2 fingers, the way he'd done 10,000 times. She saw it. She saw what he was doing, even though he hadn't taken it out. Her eyes went to his jacket pocket and then back to his face, and something moved through her own face that she didn't manage to close off in time. He walked to the door. Lock up, he said. Don't open it for anyone until morning. And Sarah? He paused with his hand on the knob. Don't disappear again. He left without waiting to see if she'd answer. The call with Marcus lasted 40 minutes and covered ground that made Lucian's jaw ache from keeping it still. He sat in the back of the car while the city moved past the windows and listened to Marcus lay out 6 months of Cassian Thorne's financial activity in the organized, bloodless way that Marcus laid out everything. And what it painted was not a man in semi-retirement enjoying the fruits of a decade's work, but a man who had recently begun liquidating positions, consolidating assets, restructuring accounts in ways that were subtle enough to miss if you weren't looking and obvious enough to understand if you were. Cassian was preparing to move. There's more, Marcus said. Say it. 3 of the shell entities he uses for the European accounts have been accessed in the last 8 weeks from IP addresses we can't pin down. Someone's been doing reconnaissance on the structure. Not from inside our organization, from outside. Someone who already knows what to look for. Lucian processed that. The files Serafina has, if they include routing codes for those structures, then whoever planted them on her knew exactly what they were putting in her hands, Marcus said, and knew that if Cassian ever found out, he'd come looking. Why didn't he find her sooner? She's good, sir. 3 cities, 4 names, careful about digital footprint, and maybe he wasn't motivated to look harder until recently. Until whoever's been accessing those accounts from outside made him realize the exposure risk was live. Lucian looked out the window. A late-night restaurant was still serving, tables visible through glass, ordinary people eating ordinary food and not knowing about any of this. The bomb was a retrieval attempt, he said, not a kill. If she'd been inside, yes, but the shape of the blast, you said it targeted the interior of the shop. Consistent with looking for something, flushing her out, or getting access while she ran. But she wasn't inside. No, she was on the street with the boy. So they failed, Lucian said, which means they'll try again. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Sir, if Cassian knows she's in the city, he knows. The shop's been there 4 years. He found her, Marcus. He just hasn't moved until now. Lucian paused. Something changed recently. Something made him decide he couldn't wait anymore. Neither of them said anything for a moment. The boy, Marcus said carefully. If Cassian knew about the boy. He doesn't, Lucian said. It came out harder than he intended. With respect, sir, we didn't know about the boy until tonight. Lucian didn't answer that. Because Marcus was right, and the implication of it, that Cassian might know something Lucian had only just learned, sat in the car with them like a third passenger. Double the surveillance on Cassian's primary residence, he said. I want to know who visits, who calls, when he sleeps, and when he doesn't. And pull everything we have on his ties to the Garrow Street area. Businesses, properties, people. He paused. Do it quietly. He cannot know we're looking. Understood. And Marcus. Lucian looked out at the city. Get me everything you can find on the financial firm she worked for. The one she was at before she ran. I want to know who owned it, who the clients were, and whether any of the client accounts have any connection to Cassian's structures. That's a lot of ground. I know. Tonight? Start tonight. Barset. He went to see Cassian the next morning. This was deliberate. The worst thing he could do was deviate from routine. Cassian had eyes inside the organization. Had to. There was no other explanation for the security leaks that had been nagging at the edges of Veil operations for the last 18 months. Those leaks, which Lucian had been treating as an internal discipline problem, looked very different this morning. Cassian Thorne lived in a brownstone on the north end of the city that he'd owned for 30 years. He was 71, silver-haired, with the kind of face that had been handsome once and had curdled into distinguished. He had a library full of books he'd actually read, and a study where he'd made decisions that cost lives, and a habit of serving expensive tea that Lucian had always read as affectation and now read as control. The choice of a man who wanted to set the terms of every interaction, even the small ones. He poured the tea himself. He always did. You look tired, Cassian said. There was an incident on Garrow Street last night. An explosion. Cassian's hands were steady on the teapot. Lucian watched them. Steadiness in unexpected moments was its own kind of tell. Most people's hands moved slightly when they heard news that was real to them. Cassian's didn't. I heard, Cassian said. Gas line, they're saying. That's what they're saying. Were you near it? Passing through, Cassian set the teapot down and sat across from him and picked up his own cup. His eyes were the color of old pewter, and they were doing the thing they always did, appearing to be warm and attentive while actually measuring distance. Lucian had taken that look for wisdom for 10 years. Nasty business, Cassian said. The neighborhood's been having issues. Has it? Historically underserved. These things happen. Lucian looked at him. Cassian looked back. Between them, the tea cooled in its cups. There was a woman, Lucian said. A shop owner. She and her son were caught in the blast. Tragic. She was someone I knew, as it turns out, years ago. Something happened in Cassian's eyes. Microscopic. The adjustment of a man recalibrating. Small world, Cassian said. Isn't it? Is she all right? She's fine. Lucian picked up his cup, didn't drink from it. Minor injuries shaken up. I had my people look into the blast. Force of habit. The shape of the damage is interesting. Oh? Not a gas line. Cassian was quiet for a beat. One beat. Exactly. Not the natural pause of a man absorbing new information, but the deliberate pause of a man choosing how to respond to information he already had. Well, he said, that's concerning. Have you notified the authorities? Not yet. You should. I will. Lucian set the cup down. I just wanted to run it by you first, since you have contacts in the district. Of course. Happy to make some calls. I appreciate that. They looked at each other. Lucian stood. I should let you get on with your morning. Always a pleasure, Cassian said. He rose too. Old courtesy, old habit. He walked Lucian to the door of the study, and at the threshold he put one hand briefly on Lucian's shoulder in the way he'd been doing for a decade, the avuncular weight of a man who had made himself indispensable through the sustained performance of loyalty. Lucian felt the weight of it and kept his face still. The woman, Cassian said. The shop owner. What was her name? Lucian paused. He had been waiting for this. He had set the hook 12 minutes ago, and he had waited, and here it was. He turned. Why do you ask? Just curious. You said you knew her. He smiled. Old acquaintance. Not important. He left. In the car, his hands were not steady. Marcus was waiting at the office with a folder and an expression that Lucian had learned to associate with information that was going to cost something. The financial firm, Marcus said. Elara Capital Management. Closed 11 years ago. Ownership traced through 2 holding companies to a trust. He paused. The trust is one of Cassian Thorne's oldest structures. Lucian sat down. She worked for him, he said, without knowing it. It gets worse. Marcus opened the folder. The client accounts, the ones the files she took would have documented. 3 of them are still active. They've been moved and restructured, but the underlying entities are the same. And the external access we flagged last month, the IP addresses doing reconnaissance on those accounts. He stopped. Say it. One of them traces to a federal building, an investigative agency. The room was very quiet. Someone in federal law enforcement has been building a case, Lucian said, for at least 8 weeks, maybe longer. Using what? Marcus looked at him steadily. Using information that could only have come from documents that left Elara Capital 11 years ago. Lucian understood it then, the full shape of it, snapping into place like a mechanism that had been waiting for its last piece. Serafina hadn't just been a hiding place for 10 years. She'd been the key. Someone had planted those files on her and then kept her alive and hidden and lost in the country. A walking insurance policy. A piece of evidence that couldn't be confiscated because no one official knew it existed. And now Cassian had found her. And now a federal investigation was closing in. And now Rowan. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Clean line. He answered. The voice on the other end was Serafina's, and it was very controlled and very quiet in the way that people get when they are trying not to communicate fear to someone nearby. I took Rowan to school this morning, she said. I know you said not to, but I thought one morning would be fine. I thought it was daylight and there were people. Sarah. He didn't come out at dismissal, she said. Lucian. He didn't come out, and the school said he was signed out at 11 by someone with authorization. But I didn't authorize anyone. I didn't. Her voice cracked. Once. Then she sealed it back. Lucian. Her voice came through the line a second time, thinner now, the control in it costing her visibly even through a phone speaker. Tell me what to do. He was already standing, already moving toward the door with the phone pressed to his ear and his other hand finding his jacket, and his mind running the numbers with a cold, mechanical speed that was the only thing keeping everything underneath it from becoming something he couldn't use. Where are you right now? He said. Outside the school, on the street. Don't go back inside. Don't talk to the administrators again. Walk to the corner of whatever block you're on and tell me the cross street. He heard her moving. Heard the sound of her shoes on pavement, quick and deliberate. Harmon and 11th, she said. Stay on that corner. Don't use your phone for anything else. I'll have someone with you in 4 minutes. Lucian? 4 minutes, Sarah. Stay visible. Stay in public. He hung up and turned to Marcus, who had been reading his face and was already reaching for his own phone. Harmon and 11th, Lucian said. Send Diva. Nobody else. And I want every camera in a 6-block radius of that school pulled in the next 10 minutes. City feed, private, business security, all of it. Whatever shows a child leaving that building at 11 this morning. On it. And get the car. He was in the elevator before Marcus finished the sentence. What? The school was a squat brick building on the east side with a chain-link fence around the yard, and a painted mural on the south wall that had been cheerful once and had faded into something ghostly. Lucian's car pulled to the curb a block and a half down, and he walked the rest of it because arriving in a vehicle that cost more than most of the neighborhood earned in a year was the kind of thing that got remembered. Serafina was on the corner where he'd told her to be. She'd found a doorway to stand in, instinct, cover, sight lines, and she had her arms wrapped around herself and her eyes moving over the street with the rapid, systematic quality of someone who had long ago learned how to scan a space for threat. When she saw him coming, she pushed out of the doorway and crossed to him and stopped 2 feet away with her jaw set and her eyes dry, and everything she was feeling contained inside a visible physical tension that ran from her shoulders straight down through her hands. Tell me you know where he is, she said. Not yet. Something moved across her face. She absorbed it. Tell me you can find him. Yes. She held his gaze for a moment, measuring the word the way someone measures ice they have to walk on. Then she gave a single tight nod, and he understood she was choosing to believe him not because she trusted him, not yet, maybe not ever again in the way she once had, but because she had no better option, and she was smart enough to know it. Walk with me, he said. They moved down the block. He kept her on his left, between himself and the buildings, with the street on his side. She noticed. She didn't comment. Tell me exactly what the school said, he told her. The front office said Rowan was signed out at 10:58. They had a signed permission form in the system. My signature. She paused. It wasn't my signature. Did they give you a name, the person who picked him up? They said it was logged as a family friend, no name on record, which they said was in accordance with my standing authorization form. Her voice was flat, clinical, holding itself in a shape that could be used. I never signed any standing authorization form. I never signed anything that would allow someone to take him without contacting me first. Someone put it in their system. Before today. It was already in there, which means this was planned, not reactive. Whoever took him planned it before the bomb. She stopped walking. He stopped with her. They used the bomb to find out where I was, or to scare me, or to make me move in a direction they wanted. And while I was dealing with that, while I was dealing with you, someone was already inside the school's administrative system. He looked at her. Cassian has people who can do that, he said. I know. She said it without inflection. I've always known what he has. That's why I ran. They stood on the sidewalk in the thin morning light, and a woman pushed a stroller past them without looking up, and a delivery truck idled at the next corner, and the world continued its indifferent business around them. He's using Rowan to get the drive, Lucian said. Yes. Do you have it with you? No. Can you get to it quickly? She looked at him. If I give it to him, he'll... I know. So the answer is no. The answer is, we don't hand him anything until Rowan is in front of me and unhurt. Agreed. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She looked at the screen and went very still. He watched her face. She turned the phone so he could see it. The text was from an unknown number. It was 4 words and a photograph. The 4 words were, "We'll be in touch." The photograph was Rowan sitting in the back seat of a car, wearing his school backpack, looking out the window. He appeared unharmed. He appeared, and this was the thing that hit Lucian low and hard in a place he hadn't expected, to be looking out at the street with that same serious, unafraid face, not crying, not visibly panicked, just watching. His son, watching the world go by from inside a moving car, being taken somewhere Lucian didn't know. He became aware that his hand had closed around the phone, Serafina's phone, in her grip, and that he had taken her wrist without meaning to, and that she was letting him, and that neither of them said anything for a moment. He let go. "All right," he said. His voice came out level. He made it come out level. "Come with me, Arcant." His secondary property was a townhouse in a neighborhood that didn't know his name. Clean title, corporate ownership, nothing that linked back to Vale directly. He used it for meetings that needed to not exist and occasionally for exactly this kind of situation, which was a thing he had prepared for in the abstract and was now living in the specific. He got Serafina inside and got Marcus on the phone and started building the picture. The camera footage came in 20 minutes later. Marcus had pulled it fast. 3 angles from business security systems, 1 from a city traffic camera half a block down. The image quality was what it was, but it was enough. A dark sedan, no plates. The rear plate had been obscured, and whoever was driving had positioned the car during pickup to keep the front plate out of frame. 2 people in the front. 1 adult accompanying Rowan to the car, and Lucian watched the footage 3 times, and on the 3rd time identified something. "Freeze it there," he said. Marcus stopped the feed. The adult walking Rowan to the car had their face angled down and away from every camera. Deliberate, practiced. But the walk, the particular economy of movement, the way the weight shifted in the right shoulder. Lucian had seen that walk for 10 years. "That's someone from inside the organization," he said. Marcus didn't answer immediately. "Marcus?" "I see it," Marcus said. His voice was careful. "The gait analysis isn't definitive without—" "I don't need gait analysis." Lucian looked at the frozen frame. "I know that walk. I have watched that walk come in and out of my offices for years." He stared at the image. "Who has been in contact with Cassian from inside our structure? Give me names." "Lucian." "Names, Marcus." A silence, the kind that had weight. "I've had suspicions about 2 people for the past several months," Marcus said. "I didn't bring them to you because I didn't have proof. I wanted to be certain before I say the names. Garrett Knoll and—" Another pause, shorter, but Lucian felt it. "Deva." The room changed. Deva, who Marcus had sent to collect Serafina off the corner of Harmon and 11th. Deva, who had been Lucian's personal security detail for 7 years. Deva, who had walked Serafina to where? To what? He had assumed she was safe. He had assumed— "Where's Serafina?" he said. She was standing 6 feet behind him in the kitchen doorway. He turned and saw her, and the single beat of relief that hit him was immediately replaced by something colder. "She came with me directly," he said. "She's here." "Then Deva doesn't know the location," Marcus said. "Not yet." "I'm pulling her access now." "Do it." Lucian looked at Serafina, who had heard enough from one side of the conversation to understand the shape of it. Her face had gone white around the edges. Not from fear exactly, but from the particular nausea of someone learning that the threat has more arms than they thought. "And find Deva. I want to know where she is and who she's talking to." He ended the call. Serafina looked at him from the kitchen doorway. "You sent someone compromised to collect me." "I didn't know she was compromised." "But you know now." "Yes." She absorbed this. Her hand went to the wall briefly, not for support, just contact, something solid. Then she took it away. "How deep does it go?" she said. "I don't know yet." 2 people, minimum. At minimum. "Who else?" "I'm finding out." She crossed her arms. Her eyes went somewhere internal, the calculating, organizing look of someone running damage assessment. "He has someone inside your structure. He has the ability to access a school's administrative system. He has at least 2 vehicles and a pickup team that moved without attracting attention in a public place in broad daylight." She paused. "He's been preparing this for a long time. This isn't reactive. He didn't panic when you showed up last night. He already had this in motion." "Yes." "Which means he knew you'd find her, or he planned for it." She looked at him directly. "Lucian, what if finding me wasn't coincidental?" He was quiet. "What if you were supposed to find me?" she said. "What if the bomb was designed to bring you to Garrow Street?" He had been in the neighborhood. He had been passing through, but he passed through that neighborhood maybe twice a year. if that. He had gone last night because he had a meeting 3 blocks north that had been on his calendar for 6 weeks. A meeting arranged by Cassian's recommendation. He sat down. He was not someone who sat down in the middle of a crisis, but he sat down now, in the chair nearest the window, and placed both hands flat on his knees and breathed. He set the meeting, he said. What meeting? The reason I was in that neighborhood last night. Cassian suggested the venue 6 weeks ago, said it was a good location for what we needed, neutral ground, convenient. He stopped. He put me 1 block from your shop. Serafina didn't say anything. He knew I'd see the explosion. He knew I'd go toward it. Lucian stared at the middle distance. He wanted me to find you. He wanted this, me, you, in the same space, activated. Because the moment I found out about Rowan, you'd go to war, she said quietly. He knows how I operate. He's watched me operate for 10 years. He knows that finding out I have a son who's been in danger would make me... He knows what it would make me do. He wants you to go to war, she said. Why? Lucian's hands were still flat on his knees. Because a war gives him cover. If I go after him with everything I have, if I mobilize the full organization in a direct assault, it looks like aggression from my side. It looks like me breaking agreements, violating truces, destabilizing structures that a federal investigation is currently documenting. He paused. It makes me look like the threat, and it gives every allied organization an excuse to move against me simultaneously, while Cassian watches from outside the blast radius. The room was very quiet. He's going to let you destroy yourself, Serafina said. He's counting on it. She uncrossed her arms, put one hand on the kitchen table, leaned on it slightly. She was thinking. He could see it in the particular quality of her stillness, the way she'd always gone quiet when she was working through something hard. The federal investigation, she said. You said someone was accessing Cassian's accounts, building a case. Yes. If they have enough to move, they don't, not yet. What they have is circumstantial without the documents on that drive. He looked at her. You are the case, Sarah. You've been the case for 10 years. The files you have are the direct link between Cassian's shell structures and the accounts they've been investigating. Without them, they have patterns and theories. With them, they have evidence. She stood up straight. He took Rowan to get the drive, she said. Yes. And if he gets the drive, the federal case collapses. And every witness who could connect him to the original conspiracy is either discredited or gone. She looked at him. He looked at her. He's going to call, she said. With terms. Soon, he needs the drive before the investigators move. He's running out of time, which is why all of this is happening now. The bomb, Rowan, the inside people. He's compressing the timeline because he has to. So we have a window. A small one. Then stop explaining the situation to me, she said, and her voice had changed. The grief and fear still there, underneath. But something harder riding on top of it, something that had been living quietly in her for 9 years of running and surviving and building a life from nothing in strange cities, and figure out how to use it. He looked at her for a moment. Then he picked up his phone. The call from Cassian came at 2:17 in the afternoon, not Cassian's personal number, a clean line, the same carefulness Lucian used himself, and for a moment the parallel sat ugly and close. He let it ring twice before he answered, because answering immediately communicated urgency, and urgency communicated leverage. I've been hoping we'd have a chance to speak more directly, Cassian said. His voice was the same as it always was. Measured, warm at the edges, the voice of a man presiding over a difficult but necessary conversation. Lucian said nothing. The boy is fine, Cassian said. He's had lunch. He's been perfectly calm, actually. Remarkable child. He has your temperament, I think. The hand holding the phone tightened once and then deliberately released. What do you want? Lucian said. You know what I want? Say it anyway. A brief pause. The storage device that Serafina has been carrying for 11 years. It comes to me. The boy goes home. And this whole complicated evening resolves itself cleanly. Another pause. The alternative is a conversation I'd rather not have. You've been planning this since the beginning, Lucian said. The firm, the files, planting them on her before you sent your people to run her out. What was the plan then? Use them if you ever needed leverage. An insurance policy? The silence on the other end lasted 3 seconds, which was a long time from Cassian. You've been busy, he said. The warmth in his voice had receded slightly. Not gone, Cassian never let it go entirely, but receded. I underestimated how quickly you'd put it together. You overestimated how long it would take me to look at you clearly. I gave you everything, Lucian, the organization, the infrastructure. 10 years of my... You gave me a lie I was willing to live inside, Lucian said. That's different. The result was the same. The result was never the point. Another silence. Different quality. Not calculation this time, but something else. Something that might have been genuine, in the way that a man who has spent his life performing sincerity sometimes accidentally produces it. The drive, Cassian said. I'll give you until 6 o'clock. I need more time. You don't. 6 o'clock, Lucian. The address will come to this number. A pause. Don't bring your people. I'll know if you do. The line went dead. Lucian set the phone on the table. Serafina was across the room, watching him. She'd heard his side of it, and she was doing the math the same way he was. 6 o'clock, she said. Yes. He'll kill us both at the exchange. The drive, then us. Then Rowan is a loose end with no one left to protect him. I know. So we don't go to the exchange. We have to go to the exchange. She stared at him. Lucian, we have to go, he said, because Rowan will be there. He needs us to come. He needs to believe the exchange is real long enough for us to get to Rowan. He paused. And because I need Cassian to believe he's won until the moment he understands he hasn't. She looked at him steadily. What's the plan? He reached for his phone again. There was a number he had not called in 4 years. A number belonging to a woman named Iris Vane, who worked for the federal agency that had been building its case in the dark, who had reached out to him twice through back channels and been turned away twice, and who was, as of 8 weeks ago, actively accessing Cassian Thorne's financial architecture from a federal building. He had the drive, or he would have it in the next 2 hours. When Serafina retrieved it, he had Cassian's voice on a recorded line making explicit reference to the exchange. He had a 6-hour window. What he did not have was any guarantee that walking into whatever location Cassian chose at 6 o'clock with a 9-year-old somewhere inside it was going to end with everyone breathing. His phone buzzed. Marcus. The text read, Diva located. She's not alone. Lucian, there's a third name. Someone you need to see in person. Come now. He looked at Serafina. She read his face. Go, she said. I'll get the drive. I'll meet you back here in an hour. You shouldn't be alone right now. I've been alone for 9 years. She picked up her jacket from the chair. I know how to be careful. She paused at the door and looked back at him, and something in her face was open in a way it hadn't been since the kitchen of her apartment. Not soft, nothing like soft, but real. Unguarded for just that second. Bring him home, Lucian, whatever it costs. Bring him home. She left. He stood in the empty room for 3 seconds, which was as long as he could afford. Then he followed. Marcus was in a warehouse on the south end that the Vale organization used for the kind of meetings that generated no paperwork. He had Diva contained. That was the word Marcus used on the phone, contained with the particular neutrality of a man who had done this before, in a back office. And when Lucian walked in, she was sitting in a chair with her wrists zip-tied to the armrests, and her face carrying the expression of someone who has already done the math and knows how the numbers come out. Diva was 44. She'd come to him out of a private security background, ex-military, sharp, and economical in everything she did. He had trusted her with his physical safety for 7 years. He had trusted her with Serafina's safety this morning. He pulled a chair up and sat directly across from her. How long? He said. She looked at him. She was not going to perform remorse for him, and he respected that even as it sickened him. 3 years, she said. What did he give you? Money, and he had something on my brother. A pause. My brother is out of it now. Cassian kept his word on that much. What did you give him? Schedules, security rotations, safe house locations. She held his gaze. I didn't give him anything that got anyone killed. You gave him Serafina's location this morning. I gave him confirmation that she was with you. He already knew where she lived. She paused. I'm sorry for that. You're sorry. I know what that's worth. He breathed. In through the nose, out slow, the way he'd trained himself to do when what he wanted was to put his hand through a wall. The third name, he said. Marcus said there was a third name. Diva looked at him. Something moved through her face. Not reluctance. Something more complicated. The look of someone about to deliver information they understand will change the room. Cassian has a contact inside the federal investigation, she said. Someone who's been feeding him the timeline on the case, telling him how close they are, what they're looking for, when they plan to move. She paused. That's why he compressed the timeline. The investigator told him they were planning to seek a warrant within the next 10 days. Who is it? Her name is Iris Vane, Diva said. Lucian went completely still. Iris Vane, the woman he'd been about to call, the federal contact he'd been building his entire plan around. The back channel he'd decided 20 minutes ago was his best remaining option to get Cassian into custody before 6 o'clock. She's been running both sides, Diva said. She built the case file to keep Cassian informed about what was on record and what wasn't. When the drive surfaced in their surveillance, when they realized Serafina might have the original documents, Vane told Cassian immediately. That's what started all of this. That's what put the bomb on Garrow Street. The silence in the room was absolute. Every play he'd had left was gone. The federal route closed. The exchange, a trap. His organization, compromised at least 3 deep. His son in the hands of a man who had been playing this game longer than Lucian had been alive, and a clock counting down to 6 o'clock, and Serafina somewhere in the city alone retrieving a drive that was the only thing standing between Cassian Thorne and complete erasure of every crime he had ever committed sat in Serafina's bag somewhere in the city, and Lucian had exactly one move left, and it was a bad one. He stood up. Diva watched him from the chair. Her wrists were still zip-tied to the armrests, and she watched him with the flat, accepting look of someone who has already filed away their own outcome and is simply waiting for the paperwork to catch up. The exchange location, Lucian said. You know where it is. No. Diva. I don't. He compartmentalizes. I got schedules and rotations. I didn't get operational details. He believed her. Cassian was too careful to hand a single asset the full picture. His other properties, Lucian said. The ones not in any filing. The ones you heard about. She thought. He watched her think. Not performing thought, actually sorting through what she had. There's a facility south of the city, she said. Old freight distribution center. He used it twice in the 3 years I was working with him. Once for storage, once for something I was told not to ask about. She paused. It's registered to a company called Halvard Logistics. I heard the name once and remembered it because it was unusual. He looked at Marcus. Marcus was already on his phone. Lucian walked to the door, stopped, turned back. Your brother, he said. Is he clear? Diva looked at him. Something moved in her face. Yes. Then we're done. He left her sitting in the chair. Marcus would handle the rest. Marcus handled everything, which was something Lucian had always counted on, and was now examining with the new, uncomfortable awareness that he had counted on Diva for 7 years as well, and before that there had been other people. And the entire architecture of trust he had built his empire on was a structure with more rot in it than he'd been willing to see. He called Serafina from the car. She picked up on the second ring. I have it. Get back to the townhouse. Don't stop anywhere. I'm 10 minutes out. Go faster. A pause. He heard the sound of her moving, the ambient noise of the street shifting as she changed pace. What happened? She said. Vane is compromised. She's been feeding Cassian the investigation timeline. We can't use her. The silence on her end lasted about 4 seconds. So we have no federal angle, she said. Not through her. Is there another way in? I'm working on it. He was. His mind was pulling at the problem from every available angle, looking for the edge that wasn't Vane, looking for the thread inside the federal structure that ran through a different hand. "Get back to the townhouse. We have less than 4 hours." Quote. She was already there when he arrived, sitting at the kitchen table with a small, waterproof case in front of her. Gunmetal gray, worn at the corners, the latch reinforced with a strip of electrical tape that had been replaced so many times it had its own texture. The drive was inside it. He could tell by the way she kept one hand on the table next to it, not touching it, but proximate. The posture of someone who has carried something for so long that proximity has become reflex. He sat across from her. They looked at each other. "Open it," he said. She opened the case. The drive was a standard thumb drive in an anti-static sleeve, unremarkable in every physical way, the kind of thing you'd find in the bottom of a desk drawer and not think twice about. She set it on the table between them. He didn't touch it either. "If we plug that in," he said, "and what's on it is what I think it is, routing structures, account numbers, transfer records going back 11 years, then it's the direct evidentiary link between Cassian's shell companies and every financial crime he's committed since before he took control of those structures. Money laundering, wire fraud, conspiracy charges that would take a federal prosecutor about 6 months to build into something airtight. But Vane is the federal contact. Vane is one contact." He looked at the drive. "There are other agencies, other investigators who've been working adjacent to this space, Organized Crime Task Force, Financial Crimes Unit. Vane is FBI. This material could go to the Treasury's Enforcement Division, and she'd have no jurisdiction over it." Serafina looked at him. "Do you have a contact there?" "I have a contact who has a contact," he paused. "It's thinner than I'd like." "How thin?" "A man named Corso. He was a financial crimes investigator for 12 years. He left federal service 3 years ago and now works private compliance consulting. I've had 2 conversations with him about unrelated matters. He was thorough and he was honest, which means he's probably bored in the private sector." Lucian looked at the drive. "If I can get him the material on that drive and enough context to understand what he's looking at, he has former colleagues who still work the financial crimes desk. People who are not Vane. People who could potentially move fast enough to matter." How fast is fast enough? Before 6 o'clock. He checked the time. 3 hours and 40 minutes. "It's tight." "Everything about this is tight." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "What about Rowan?" "We still have to go to the exchange." "With no backup." "With whatever we can put together in the next 3 hours." He met her eyes. "I know what I'm asking. You're asking me to walk into a building where a man who has been trying to erase us for 11 years is holding my son, with no external support, on a timeline that depends on a former federal investigator making calls to former colleagues in under 4 hours." "Yes." She looked at him steadily. "Okay." He blinked. He had prepared for more resistance. "Okay," she said again. "Then tell me what you need me to do." Set. The next 2 hours were the most precisely occupied 2 hours Lucian could remember. Marcus ran the Halvard logistics property, confirmed the freight center, confirmed it had been maintained with recent utility activity, confirmed 2 vehicles registered to a Cassian-adjacent shell company had been logged in that area by traffic cameras in the last 48 hours. The location was real. The exchange would be there. Corso called back in 40 minutes, which was faster than Lucian had hoped. He was a compact man with a flat Midwestern voice that gave nothing away, and he listened to Lucian's summary without interrupting, and when it was done, he was quiet for 11 seconds. "If what's on that drive is what you're describing," Corso said, "and it can be authenticated, I can authenticate the chain of custody. I have the original source location, the date of acquisition, and a witness who held the material continuously for 11 years. The woman. Yes. She'd have to testify. She'll testify." Lucian looked at Serafina across the room. She was listening to his side of it. She gave a single nod. "She'll testify." Another silence. "The contacts I'd be calling, they're not going to move on faith. They'd need to see the material, enough to verify it's substantive. I can get you a copy in the next 30 minutes, redacted to show structure without revealing the most sensitive specifics until there's a formal agreement." That's a lot of trust to ask for on a 3-hour timeline. I know. Vane is going to find out. If this reaches the financial crimes desk and it's real, she's going to know. Yes. That exposes her. She'll move to protect herself. Yes. And Cassian will know that she's been exposed, which is why it needs to happen simultaneously with the exchange, not before. The moment the material reaches your contacts, I need to be at the exchange location. Corso was quiet again. You're running a 3-hour clock on a coordinated action with no margin for error, using contacts you've never worked with, on material you've never verified, in a situation where if any single part fails, I know what the failure state looks like, Lucian said. I'd rather know than not. A pause. Send me the copy. I'll make the calls. Lucian ended the call. Marcus already had the redacted file prepared. He'd been moving parallel to the conversation, anticipating each step, which was why Lucian had trusted him for 15 years and was now carefully, coldly examining that trust as well. Marcus had been right about Deva. Marcus had withheld the suspicion for months. That was a conversation for another time, if there was another time. He sent the file to Corso. 3 hours and 8 minutes to 6 o'clock. He looked at Serafina. We need to talk about what we're walking into, he said. She pulled her chair out and sat down. Talk. The freight center has multiple entry points. Loading dock on the south side, main personnel entrance on the east, 2 fire exits that may or may not be alarmed. Cassian will have people positioned inside, minimum 4, probably 6. He'll have Rowan somewhere accessible to him but not immediately visible to us. The exchange protocol will be designed to put us in a position where we hand over the drive before we see Rowan, because the moment we have eyes on Rowan and confirm he's unharmed, our leverage calculation changes. So we don't hand over the drive until we have Rowan. He won't agree to that. Then we fake it. Lucian looked at her. What? She reached into her jacket pocket and put a second drive on the table next to the first. Standard thumb drive, same form factor, same color. She'd bought it. He didn't know when, sometime in the last 2 hours, while he wasn't watching every move. I was a financial management clerk for 2 years, she said. I know what account documents look like. I've had 11 years to think about what's on that drive. She paused. I can put together something that looks real for the first 30 seconds of inspection. It won't hold up to serious verification, but 30 seconds is enough time to get Rowan to the door. He stared at her. You've been preparing for this. I've been preparing for the version of this where I had to do it alone. She looked at him evenly. Having you here changes the math. It doesn't change the principle. He picked up the decoy drive, turned it over. It was identical in weight and appearance to the real one. She'd stripped the casing and repackaged it to match, which required tools and time and the kind of methodical precision that people develop through years of operating without a net. He set it down. All right, he said. We use the decoy for the handoff. The moment Rowan is between us and the door, we move. He paused. Cassian will realize the switch within minutes. We only need minutes. His people will be between us and the exit. Then we deal with his people. She said it the same way she said everything. Level, unornamented, without performance. He had loved her at 22 for the softness that existed underneath the steadiness. He understood now that what he was looking at was the steadiness itself, stripped of everything else by 11 years of necessity, and it was, he did not have a better word for it, formidable. Can you fight? He said. I've been taking classes for 6 years. A pause. I'm not you, but I can create space. That's all I need. She nodded. Then, Lucian? She paused. If something goes wrong in there, if it goes wrong, and there's a choice between Rowan getting out and either of us getting out, don't. I'm finishing the sentence. I know what the sentence is. Then we agree, she said. He looked at her for a long moment. We agree, he said. The address came to his phone at 5:43. Halvard Logistics, exactly as Marcus had found it. South of the city, an 8-minute drive from their current position in light traffic. Marcus handed him a Sig Sauer and a hip holster and a second weapon, compact, which Lucian passed to Serafina. She checked the magazine with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done it before, which surprised him, which he didn't show. "Where'd you learn that?" he said. "Third City," she said. "There was a woman at the range on Tuesdays and Thursdays who was also running from something. We didn't ask each other questions." She racked the slide, confirmed the chamber, clicked the safety. "She was a good teacher." They got in the car. Lucian sent a text to Corso. "Moving to location. Clock starts now." Corso's reply came back in under 30 seconds. "Contacts confirmed. Moving parallel. Vane flagged internally as of 5 minutes ago. You have a window." He showed the text to Serafina. She read it, put her hand flat on her knee, looked out the window at the city going by. "Whatever happens in there," she said, not looking at him, "I need you to know I don't blame you for any of it." A pause. "I blamed you for a long time. It was easier than the alternative." He kept his eyes on the road. The alternative. Accepting that we were both victims of the same person, that there was no villain between us. She paused. Anger kept me moving. I needed it. Another pause. "I don't need it anymore." The freight center appeared ahead of them. A low, wide building with corrugated steel walls and a parking area that was mostly empty, lit by a handful of industrial lights that left more shadow than illumination. 2 vehicles were parked near the east entrance. A third was visible along the south loading dock. Lucian pulled into the lot slowly. No sudden movements. He wanted Cashin's people to see them coming, to register compliance, to read it as 2 people who had made the calculation and accepted the terms. He put the car in park. Checked the time. 5:59. "The decoy is in your left jacket pocket," he said. "I know." "The real one is in the case in the back seat. Marcus has the duplicate on file. If we don't come out, we're coming out," she said. He looked at her. She looked back. He got out of the car. The east entrance opened into a corridor that smelled of diesel and cold concrete, and the particular staleness of a building that had been mechanically maintained without being lived in. Fluorescent lights ran along the ceiling, half of them dead, the working ones casting a flat, institutional light that turned everything gray. 2 men met them at the corridor and entrance. Neither introduced themselves. One gestured forward, the other fell in behind. They were walked through the corridor into the main floor of the freight center, a vast, high-ceilinged space with old racking systems along the walls and a cleared center area that had been deliberately emptied. 4 more men visible. Positions in each corner of the space, which was textbook, and told him the person who arranged the layout had training but was not imaginative. Cassian was in the center. He stood with his hands clasped in front of him and his silver hair neat, and his posture carrying the patience of a man who has been waiting for something for a long time and has finally arrived at the moment of collection. He wore a dark jacket, no tie. He looked, as he always did, like the most reasonable person in the room. Beside him, sitting in a folding chair with his arms crossed and his jaw set in the particular expression of a child who has decided to be angry rather than afraid, was Rowan. Rowan's eyes found Lucian first, then Serafina. His face changed. Not melting, not crying, but something releasing, some load-bearing tension going out of his small frame. And he started to rise from the chair, and Cassian put one hand on his shoulder, and he stilled. "Stay seated for just a moment longer," Cassian said to Rowan, pleasantly. Rowan looked at the hand on his shoulder. Then he sat back. His jaw was still set. "My son," Lucian thought, and the thought hit somewhere unprotected, and he sealed it down. "You came alone," Cassian said, looking at Lucian now. "I appreciate that." "You said to." "I said I'd know if you didn't. There's a difference." A slight pause. "But you're here, and you appear to have honored the terms, so." He spread his hands, the gesture of a reasonable man being reasonable. "The drive." Lucian didn't move yet. "The boy first." "Lucian." "The boy walks to his mother, then you get the drive." Cassian looked at him for a moment. The warmth in his eyes had the specific quality of warmth that was a choice, maintained, deliberate, performative in the way of someone who had worn a face for so long they'd forgotten the effort of it. "That's not the order of events I had in mind," Cassian said. "It's the order we're doing." A silence. The 4 men in the corners were still. The 2 who had walked them in were behind them, 6 total, plus the 2 by the vehicles outside. 8, possibly more he hadn't seen. You don't have leverage here, Cassian said. Neither do you, Lucian said. Not the kind you need. You need the drive. The drive doesn't come to you until the boy is with his mother. That's not negotiation. That's the condition. Cassian looked at him. Then he looked at Serafina, who was standing at Lucian's left, with her hands at her sides and her face showing nothing. Then he looked down at Rowan. Go to your mother, he said. Rowan was up before the sentence finished. He crossed the space fast, not running, the dignity of a 9-year-old who had decided not to run. And Serafina went to one knee and caught him and held him, and he put his face against her neck, and she closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. Lucian kept his eyes on Cassian. The drive, Cassian said. Lucian reached into his jacket, removed the decoy, held it at his side. Before I hand this over, he said, I want to hear you say it. Cassian's expression shifted, slight. Say what? Why? A pause. Then something moved across Cassian's face that was more genuine than anything Lucian had seen from him in 10 years. Not remorse, nothing so clean. A kind of ancient, settled conviction. The face of a man who has made a choice a very long time ago and has never seen a compelling reason to revisit it. You were always going to be your father's son, Cassian said. Brilliant, charismatic, absolutely certain that love was something you could hold alongside power without one destroying the other. He paused. Your father believed the same thing. It made him weak at critical moments. Sentimental. It nearly destroyed everything we built before I stabilized it. He looked at Lucian steadily. I couldn't allow the same mistake twice. So you destroyed my family to make me stronger. I removed a vulnerability. She was not a vulnerability. The words came out very quiet. She was a person. Rowan is a person. You spent 11 years using them like pieces on a board. I spent 11 years building something that required absolute control to survive, Cassian said. And there was an edge in it now, the first real edge. Do you understand what I held together while you were growing into it? The number of decisions I made, the number of things I sacrificed. I was not going to hand a decade of work to a man who would crack it open the moment someone he loved needed him to choose. That's what you're afraid of, Lucian said. That I'd choose wrong. That you'd choose human, Cassian looked at him. The drive, Lucian. Lucian looked back at him. Then he held out the drive. Cassian took it. He turned it in his hand once, examining it, the reflex of a careful man. And in the half-second that he was looking down at the drive and not at Lucian, Serafina moved. She had Rowan up and moving toward the south loading dock in one motion. Not the east entrance they'd come in through, the south exit, the one that her eyes had been tracking since they walked in. Lucian moved simultaneously, cutting left, putting himself between Cassian and the south wall, giving her the lane. The 2 men who'd walked them in moved. One reached for Lucian. He broke the man's grip and took his elbow out of alignment with a single controlled motion, and the man went down, making a sound that was more surprise than pain, and Lucian kept moving. The second man got a hand on his jacket, and he turned into it and drove his forearm up and connected with the man's jaw, and the grip released. From the corner of his eye, he saw Serafina reach the loading dock door. He heard Cassian's voice, very controlled. Hold them. The 4 cornermen started moving. Lucian put his hand on the weapon at his hip and did not draw it yet, because drawing changed the nature of everything, and he was not ready to change it yet. He moved backward toward the south wall, keeping space between himself and the approaching men, keeping his eye on the exits. You look at it, he said to Cassian, who was still holding the decoy. Go ahead, look at what's on it. Cassian looked up from the drive. His face was very still. It's going to take you about 40 seconds to realize it's not what you wanted, Lucian said, and by then you'll have a different problem. My people will stop her at the door, Cassian said. 2 people were posted at the loading dock, Lucian said. There are now 0 people posted at the loading dock. Marcus has been managing the exterior since we pulled in. He paused. You said come alone. You didn't say anything about my people being nearby. Something moved through Cassian's face. The first fracture. The real drive, Cassian said. His voice was still level. Lucian, whatever you think happens next, what? What happens next, Lucian said, is that a financial crimes investigator is sitting with a team of people who are not Iris Vane, who has been burning through the material on a verified copy of that drive for the last 2.5 hours, and who filed for an emergency warrant at 5:48 this evening. He paused. Vane is already in a room answering questions. That happened at 5:35. The four men had stopped moving. They were reading the situation the way trained men read it, looking for the actual threat vector, recalculating. Cassian stood very still. "You're bluffing," he said. "Check your phone," Lucian said. "Vane hasn't answered in the last 40 minutes, has she? I'd imagine that's been sitting in the back of your mind." A silence. Something went out of Cassian's face. Not the composure. The composure held, it would always hold. It was the structure of the man. But something underneath it. The particular light of a person who has believed, up until this moment, that they have controlled every variable. "You can't prosecute me on a copy," he said. "We have the original. Chain of custody. 11 years of documented possession by a single individual who will testify under oath. Plus the original source location, plus the financial firm's archived records, plus the last 40 minutes of your own conversation recorded on a line that's been open to the financial crimes desk since the moment I walked in that door." Lucian touched the collar of his jacket, a small device the size of a shirt button. "You've been explaining your methodology to a federal record for 40 minutes, Cassian." The room was very quiet. Then Cassian smiled. It was the most genuine expression Lucian had ever seen from him, and it was terrible, and not rage, not fear, but the smile of a man who has spent his entire life being the smartest person in the room and has just encountered the one moment where that wasn't true, and who is somehow obscenely impressed. "Your father," Cassian said, "could never have done this." "I know," Lucian said. Cassian reached into his jacket. Lucian drew. The room detonated. 2 of the 4 corner men moved for Lucian simultaneously. The other 2 went for the south wall exit where Serafina had gone. He put one shot into the concrete floor between the first 2. Not at them, not yet. And the sound of it in the enclosed space was enormous, a physical thing, and it stopped the movement for exactly 2 seconds. He heard the south door blow open from the outside. Marcus's voice, and 2 others. He heard shouting in the distance. The 2 men who'd gone for the south wall reversed. The first corner man reached him. The fight was not clean. It was never clean in an enclosed space with concrete underfoot and bad light, and a man who had 30 pounds on him and was not reluctant. Lucian took a hit to the ribs that took the air out of him. Not broken. He'd had broken before, and this wasn't it, but it was close. And he answered it with his elbow and his knee, and the controlled, accumulated violence of a man who had been in enough rooms like this to know that winning was not about power. It was about economy. The second man came in from the left. He dropped. Lucian turned. Cassian was at the east corridor entrance, moving fast for a 71-year-old. He had a phone to his ear, and his free hand was pressed flat to the wall, guiding himself through the door. Running. Lucian's ribs screamed at him. He ran anyway. The corridor was long and fluorescent, and his footsteps came back at him from both walls, and Cassian was 20 feet ahead and moving with the compressed, desperate efficiency of a man who had spent a lifetime being careful and was now burning the last of it on escape. He hit the exterior door at the end of the corridor with both hands and shoved through, and Lucian was 8 feet behind him and closing. Outside was cold. The parking lot. The industrial lights. The 2 vehicles he'd clocked on arrival. One of them was running. The driver's door was open. A man was already at the wheel. Cassian reached for the door handle. Lucian caught his arm. He yanked him back, and Cassian turned and swung with his free hand and caught Lucian across the jaw. The older man's knuckles were hard, and the impact was clean, and his vision whited for half a second. He didn't let go of the arm. He drove them both into the side of the vehicle and heard Cassian's breath go out on impact and felt him buckle at the middle and held him there against the cold metal with one forearm across his chest. Cassian looked at him, up close, without the studied warmth, without the performance of the man who had been his father's right hand and then his own. He looked like what he was, old, cornered, caught, and something in that was almost unbearable to see. Not pity, just the particular exhaustion of looking at a lie you believed for a very long time and seeing only the mechanism. "It's over," Lucian said. Cassian's jaw worked. He looked at Lucian's face. You'll dismantle everything, he said. Everything I built. Everything your father and I... Yes. It will take you years. You'll lose. I know what I'll lose. And you think it's worth it? Not a challenge, almost genuine curiosity. Lucian looked at him. Thought about a woman walking out of a burning building with a ring around her neck. Thought about a 9-year-old boy in the back seat of a car looking out the window with his father's eyes and no fear. Yes, he said. He heard Marcus behind him, heard sirens in the distance, real ones, getting closer. Cassian stopped fighting. His body went out of tension all at once, the way very old men sometimes do when they finally stop holding something up. And he stood against the side of the vehicle, looking at nothing in particular. And Lucian stepped back, and the night air came between them. The sirens got louder. Lucian's ribs ached. His jaw was going to be spectacular by morning. He became aware that his hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, the delayed release of adrenaline, the body's accounting, and he pressed them flat against his thighs and breathed. He turned away from Cassian. Serafina was standing at the corner of the building with Rowan in front of her, both hands on his shoulders, and the boy was looking at Lucian across the parking lot with that direct, unreadable, unafraid gaze, and behind them, the first set of headlights came sweeping in from the access road. Federal vehicles, 3 of them, the right people arriving at last. Lucian walked toward them. He walked toward his son. And in the cold air of the parking lot, with the sirens rising and the lights cutting across the concrete, and 11 years of wreckage settling around them like debris after a long overdue collapse, he put one hand on Rowan's head. Briefly, carefully, the touch of a man who is not yet sure he has the right, but who cannot help it. And Rowan did not pull away. And Serafina's eyes met his over the boy's head, and what lived in them was not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time, but it was something. It was the beginning of the willingness to find out what came after the wreckage. And for right now, in this parking lot with the federal vehicles pulling in, and Cassian Thorne standing against the side of a car with his hands at his sides, and the performance finally, irreversibly over, that was enough. That was more than Lucian had believed he would ever have again. He kept his hand on Rowan's head. Rowan let him. The next 4 hours were institutional and ugly and necessary. They separated everyone at the scene, standard procedure, which Lucian had anticipated and did not fight. He was put in the back of a federal vehicle while Serafina and Rowan were taken in a separate car, and he sat in the cramped back seat with his jaw swelling and his ribs making their displeasure known on every inhale, and gave a precise, detailed account to 2 agents who introduced themselves and whose names he immediately filed and held. He told them everything in the order it happened. He did not editorialize. He did not speculate. He gave them facts and evidence locations and the name of the device on his collar and confirmed that the recording was continuous from the moment he entered the freight center. One of the agents, younger, careful writer, took notes with the focused attention of someone who understood they were documenting something that was going to take years to fully prosecute. The other one asked the questions and had the kind of face that showed nothing, which Lucian respected. When they asked about Iris Vane, he answered that too, completely. He understood that being completely cooperative about Vane was the most important strategic move available to him, because the agency's instinct in situations like this was to assume that anyone who had information about internal corruption was either complicit or leveraging it, and he needed to be neither. He needed to be a man who had found out, acted immediately, and handed over everything. That was what he was. It took 40 minutes to get through the initial interview. Then they left him sitting while they conferred outside the vehicle, and he used the time to breathe carefully through his ribs and look at the freight center building and think about nothing in particular, which was a skill he had developed in his 30s and which served him well now. Marcus appeared at the vehicle window at some point. He couldn't open the door from outside, but he put his hand flat on the glass briefly, a gesture that communicated nothing specific and everything general, and Lucian nodded once. They let him out at just past 10 o'clock. He found Serafina and Rowan in the back of a second vehicle 30 yards away. The door was open. Rowan was asleep against his mother's side with the abrupt, absolute unconsciousness of a child whose body had finally collected on a day's worth of stress. Serafina was awake, looking at nothing, with one hand resting on Rowan's hair. She looked up when Lucian appeared at the door. He didn't say anything. She didn't either. He leaned against the doorframe and looked at the boy sleeping. "He didn't cry," she said quietly. "The whole time. Not once." "He was angry," Lucian said. "Yes. He gets that from you." Something moved at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile. The shadow of one. "He was asking about you," she said, "before you found us. In the months before. He'd started asking about his father." She paused. "I didn't know what to tell him." "What did you tell him?" "That his father was someone I'd loved a long time ago. That it was complicated." Another pause. "That he had his father's eyes." Lucian looked at the sleeping boy, the dark hair, the jaw, the particular way his face went completely still in sleep, all the guardedness releasing, just a kid. "He's going to have questions," Lucian said. "Many. I'd like to be there to answer them, if you'll allow it." She was quiet for a moment. "That's not something we decide tonight." "No. Or this week." "I know." "It's going to be slow," she said. "Whatever this is, whatever it becomes, it has to be slow." "Yes." She looked at him directly. "I mean that, Lucian. I'm not running anymore. But I'm also not going to I can't just—" She stopped, reorganized. 9 years. "You understand what I'm saying." "I understand." She held his gaze for a moment, measuring whether the understanding was real or performed. He let her measure it. He had nothing to perform. "Okay," she said. He straightened up from the doorframe. "I'll arrange a car, he said, "to take you both home. Or somewhere else, if you want somewhere else tonight." "Home is fine," she said. "The apartment is fine." He nodded, started to turn. "Lucian." Her voice quiet enough not to wake Rowan. He turned back. She was looking at him with her hand still on her son's hair, and the expression on her face was something that didn't have a clean name. Not gratitude, not warmth, not the early form of whatever might eventually come, but some combination of all of those things filtered through 11 years of survival and loss, and the specific exhaustion of a woman who has been holding everything together alone for so long that the presence of someone else in the load-bearing position feels both like relief and like something she doesn't quite know how to trust yet. "Thank you," she said, "for coming into that building." He thought about the ring in his pocket. He did not take it out. "Get some sleep," he said. "What?" The federal case against Cassian Thorne moved with the speed that federal cases moved when the evidence was airtight and the political motivation to resolve quickly was high. Iris Vane's involvement accelerated it. An internal corruption investigation ran parallel to the Thorne prosecution, and both developed their own momentum, the way these things did when enough people understood that the window for positioning themselves on the right side was finite. Cassian was charged formally within 72 hours of the freight center. The charges covered 11 years of financial crimes, conspiracy, obstruction, and a range of ancillary offenses that the prosecutorial team described in the kind of measured, precise language that translated, in plain terms, to, this man had been running a criminal financial architecture for more than a decade and had used it to manipulate, threaten, and destroy multiple people's lives for the purpose of absolute control. He did not take a plea. Lucian had expected that. Cassian would make them prove every piece of it, would sit in a courtroom and perform dignity and reasonableness until the evidence made that impossible to sustain, and then he would accept the outcome with the same composed bearing he'd brought to every room he'd ever walked into. He was not a man who would break under the weight of consequence. He was a man who would carry it as though the weight itself was beneath his notice. Lucian found, after the first few days, that he thought about Cassian very rarely. This surprised him. He had expected rage, sustained, burning, the kind that wanted a target and kept finding one. What he got instead was something more like the feeling he had once, after a bad storm moved through and left the yard strewn with debris, and he'd stood at the window the morning after looking at the damage. Not rage at the storm, just the steady, unglamorous recognition of what needed to be cleaned up. He started cleaning. The Vale organization had 7 legitimate business entities and 4 that were not legitimate by any honest accounting. The 7 he kept. The 4 he dismantled with the help of the same financial crimes team that had built the Thorn case in a structured cooperation agreement that cost him significant money and a period of intense scrutiny and gave him, on the other side, a clean operating position and a legal status that he had not had since he'd inherited the enterprise at 30. It was not dramatic. Dismantling something rarely was. It was meetings and documents and attorneys and the particular grinding repetition of institutional process, and he sat through all of it with the same patience he had once applied to acquiring things, because the direction had changed, but the discipline required was the same. Marcus stayed. Lucian had the conversation he'd been avoiding about the months of withheld suspicion regarding Diva and Garrett Knoll, and Marcus sat through it without defense and gave his reasoning, which was careful and wrong, and Lucian told him it was wrong and why, and Marcus listened and they moved forward. That was how it worked with someone who had been genuinely loyal for 15 years and had made a single significant error in judgment. You said the truth and you moved forward and you watched. Garrett Knoll was terminated and his cooperation with the federal investigation was handled through separate channels. He had not been the person who walked Rowan to the car. That had been one of Cassian's external operatives, identified later through camera analysis. But he had facilitated the school system access, and that was enough. He knew what he'd done. He didn't pretend otherwise. Diva was a more complicated accounting. She had given Cassian schedules and rotations. She had also, when it came to the specific moment of Serafina and Rowan's physical safety, made choices that were narrower than they could have been. The school location had been available to her and she hadn't given it. Lucian held that, examined it, and didn't know what to do with it for several weeks. Eventually, he accepted that some situations didn't resolve into clean verdicts and put it in the category of things that were finished. He never saw her again. He didn't go looking. Rowan asked about him on the 3rd day. Serafina told Lucian this on the phone, matter-of-factly, the way she relayed information now. Direct, no wrapping. She'd started calling in the evenings. Not every evening, but enough that the pattern existed. "What did he ask?" Lucian said. "He asked if you were going to come back." A pause. "I told him I didn't know, that it was something we were figuring out." "What did he say to that?" "He said okay and went back to his homework." Another pause. "He said something else. He said that you looked at him like you meant it." Lucian was quiet for a moment. "Did he say what he meant by that?" "I asked. He said he didn't know exactly, just that you looked at him like it mattered." Her voice was careful, carrying the thing it was carrying without spilling it. "He's not wrong." "No," Lucian said. "I think you should come to dinner," she said. "Not for me. For him. He needs to see that you're a real person and not a mythology. 9-year-old boys are better with concrete things than abstract ones." "When?" "Saturday." "All right." A pause. "It'll be awkward," she said. "Yes. He'll ask you questions that you're not prepared for." "Probably." "He asked me last week why I kept the ring around my neck for 10 years when I thought you were someone I was scared of." She stopped. Lucian waited. "I didn't have a clean answer," she said. He thought about what he'd said to her then, or what he hadn't said, and the 11 years the ring had spent in his jacket pocket, and decided that some things were not for phone calls. "Saturday," he said. "Saturday," she said. Dinner was, as predicted, awkward. Rowan sat across from Lucian at a kitchen table that was the same small table from the apartment, which Serafina had moved into a slightly larger place 2 weeks after the freight center. Not a dramatic change, just more room, more light, a second bedroom with a window that faced east. She had repotted the surviving plants from the flower shop, and they stood along the windowsills with the slightly bedraggled resilience of things that had been through a rough period and were not done yet. Rowan asked Lucian 4 questions during dinner. The first was about what he did for work. which Lucian answered honestly in terms a 9-year-old could use. That he managed businesses, that some of those businesses had been doing things they shouldn't have been doing, and that he'd spent the last several weeks fixing that. Rowan received this without visible judgment. The second question was about whether Lucian knew how to play chess, because Rowan played chess with a boy at school, and he was losing consistently and wanted to understand where he was going wrong. Lucian said he did know how to play chess, and they spent 20 minutes after dinner on the small table while Serafina washed dishes and deliberately did not watch. Lucian lost the first game. Not on purpose. Rowan was genuinely better than Lucian had expected and caught him with a move in the middle game that Lucian hadn't seen coming. "You left your rook exposed for 3 moves," Rowan said. "I know, I was watching the queen." "That's what you're supposed to do. Watch the queen so you don't see the rook." Lucian looked at him. "Did someone teach you that?" "The book did." He pointed at a chess book on the shelf. Worn, clearly read more than once. The spine cracked in 2 places. "It's called misdirection. You make someone look at the wrong thing." Lucian picked up the book, looked at the cover, set it back down. "You're good," he said. Rowan looked at him with that direct assessment. "You're not bad," he said. "You just got distracted." "Yes," Lucian said. "I did." Rowan considered this. Then he began resetting the pieces. The third question came while they were setting up the second game, quiet, without preamble. "Why didn't you come find us?" The kitchen went very still. Serafina's hand slowed at the sink. Lucian looked at the board for a moment, then at Rowan. "I was told something that wasn't true," he said, "about your mother. I believed it for a long time because I was angry and because it was easier to believe than the alternative." He paused. "That was a mistake, a bad one, and it had consequences that I can't undo." Rowan thought about this with the same seriousness he brought to chess. "Were you sorry when you found out it wasn't true?" "Yes." "Are you sorry now?" "Every day." A beat. "Okay," Rowan said. He moved his king's pawn forward 2 squares. "Your turn." Lucian played. The fourth question came at the end of the second game, which Lucian won, not by much, and only because Rowan overextended his bishop in the endgame, which he recognized immediately and accepted without complaint. "Are you going to be around?" Rowan said, not looking at him, looking at the board, at the final position. "If you want me to be," Lucian said. Rowan considered the board for a moment. Then he began putting the pieces away, one by one, back into the wooden box they came from. "I might want you to be," he said. "I don't know yet." "That's fair," Lucian said. "I need to think about it." "Take as long as you need." Rowan put the last piece in the box and clicked the lid shut. Then he looked up at Lucian with his father's eyes in his mother's face and said, with the devastating directness of a child who has not yet learned to soften things, "You should come back next Saturday too, in case I figure it out by then." Lucian drove home with his jaw aching where it had started to heal wrong and his ribs still complaining on the left side, and something in his chest that was not a physical sensation, and that he did not try to name, because it was too new and too fragile for a name, and he did not want to break it by handling it wrong. He reached into his jacket pocket. The ring was there. He left it there. 3 months after the freight center, Cassian Thorne entered a courtroom for the first time. Lucian was not there. He had given his testimony and deposition, thorough and documented, and the prosecutor had told him his presence at the trial was not necessary for the case and that his absence was probably advisable for reasons of optics, given the nature of the Vale organization's own restructuring process. He understood. He agreed. He found out about the first day of trial from a news alert on his phone, which he read once and then set aside. Marcus told him, 2 weeks later, that Cassian had developed a habit of sitting in his holding cell with a book. The source was reliable, a corrections officer who owed Marcus a favor from years prior. The book was apparently a collection of modern history, which Lucian found entirely in character. The man had always preferred a long view. Lucian did not feel satisfaction when Marcus told him this. He had expected to. He felt something quieter, the specific absence of something he had been carrying for 11 years. Not peace exactly. The weight of the problem, gone. He had been holding a grievance for so long that its removal felt, at first, like something missing, like reaching for a familiar ache and finding the space where it used to live. He let the space be au propos. Serafina reopened the shop 4 months later, in a space 3 streets over from Garrow. The original location had been condemned after the structural assessment post-explosion, which had produced a small insurance dispute that was resolved in her favor without drama. She found the new space in February. Longer storefront, better light from the north-facing windows, a back room large enough to actually work in rather than the cramped staging area she'd been managing at Meridian. She named it the same thing. Meridian. She said when Lucian asked that she'd been through enough changes and she was keeping the name. He had helped her move the equipment and the inventory on the first Saturday in March, along with Rowan, who turned out to have strong opinions about where the refrigeration unit should be positioned and who expressed these opinions with complete confidence and no apparent awareness that they were unsolicited. Serafina listened to him with the expression of a woman who has spent 9 years being amused by the same person and has developed a comprehensive appreciation for the specific texture of that amusement. At one point, Rowan directed Lucian to shift a shelving unit 18 inches to the left. Lucian shifted it. Rowan looked at it, told him to shift it back 12 inches. Lucian shifted it back. Rowan approved. "You're good at following directions," Rowan said. "I'm choosing to be," Lucian said. "That's what my mom says about patience." He considered the shelving unit. "She says patience is a decision, not a feeling." "She's right." "I know." He moved on to the refrigeration units with the focused authority of someone whose jurisdiction was clear to him. Lucian looked at Serafina. She was watching Rowan with her arms crossed and her shoulder against the doorframe, and that expression, the one that wasn't quite a smile, the shadow of one. And she must have felt Lucian looking because she turned her head and met his gaze. And for a moment the morning light came through the north windows and fell across both of them, and the space between them was warm and ordinary and full of the particular accumulated weight of everything it had taken to arrive at an ordinary moment. "He's going to reorganize the entire shop," she said. "Let him," Lucian said. "He has good instincts." Something moved through her face. She looked at Rowan, then back at Lucian. "He does," she said. They stood side by side in the doorway of the new shop and watched Rowan deliberate over refrigeration unit placement with the seriousness it clearly deserved, and they did not touch, and the space between them was not empty. It was full of time, of everything that time had cost, of the slow, unspectacular work of building something back from a foundation that had been poured wrong and had to be poured again. It was not romantic in any clean sense. It was 2 people in their 30s in a flower shop in the morning with a 9-year-old boy and stiff muscles and incomplete trust, and the knowledge that the next year would be harder in some ways than the last year, because the emergency had ended and now they were only themselves, without the clarifying pressure of crisis to tell them what mattered. They knew what mattered. They just had to figure out how to live inside it. In June, Rowan had a chess tournament at his school. He placed second, which he assessed afterward with the specific analytical calm of someone who had already identified exactly which game cost him the final placement and what he would do differently next time. Lucian attended. He sat in the second row of folding chairs in the school gymnasium with a paper cup of weak coffee and watched his son play 4 games against opponents who all had the wide-eyed, hyperventilating quality of children in competition, while Rowan looked as he always looked, focused, still, entirely present in the problem in front of him. He lost the semifinal to a girl 2 years older than him, who played a style Lucian recognized as pure aggression, constant pressure, no patience, designed to make the opponent anxious. Rowan was not anxious. He was simply outpaced. After, Rowan found Lucian in the gymnasium and stood in front of him and said, "She was faster." "Yes. Speed isn't the same as skill." "No, but it matters." Rowan thought about this. "I need to get faster." "You have time." "She was 11 and I'm 9. I have 2 years before I'm her age, and by then she'll be 11 and I'll still be behind." He frowned. "The math doesn't work in my favor." "The math is only unfavorable if she's still better than you when you're both the same age. That's not determined yet." Rowan looked at him. "Do you believe that? Or are you just saying something encouraging?" Lucian looked at him steadily. I saw you play 4 games today. I believe it. A pause. Then Rowan nodded, with the gravity of someone filing a piece of information in a location they'll be able to retrieve. Okay, he said. Can we get food? I'm hungry. Yes. Mom said she'd meet us outside. They walked out of the gymnasium together, through the corridor with the faded mural on the south wall, and out into the June afternoon where Serafina was standing on the sidewalk with her sunglasses on and a jacket tied around her waist. And she opened her arms when she saw Rowan coming, and he walked into them with the easy familiarity of a child who has never had to wonder whether those arms would be there. She looked at Lucian over his head. He looked back. They had not said the things that were eventually going to be said. That was still somewhere ahead of them. A night when Rowan was asleep and the apartment was quiet, and they would sit at the small kitchen table and say the things that needed to be in the open between them. There would be one of those nights. Maybe more than one. But not yet. Not today. Today was June, and a chess tournament, and a 9-year-old's hunger and the ordinary continuity of a life that had been interrupted and was not the same as it had been, but was, stubbornly and imperfectly, continuing. They walked to the restaurant. Rowan walked between them, narrating the semifinal game move by move for their benefit, identifying each decision point with the precision of a child who will spend the rest of his life inside his own head and has only recently understood that other people might want to be in there too. Lucien listened to every word. The ring came out of his pocket on a Tuesday in late autumn. It was not a planned moment. He had not rehearsed it or selected the circumstances. He had thought, at various points over the previous months, about when it might be right, and had always concluded that he would know when the time was actually present, rather than when he was imagining it. He and Serafina were in her kitchen, the new apartment, the east-facing window, the improbably surviving plants on the sill, and it was late, past 11, Rowan asleep for 2 hours. They'd had dinner earlier, and she'd poured tea after, and they'd talked about nothing in particular, the kind of conversation that was not nothing at all, but the accumulated daily tissue of 2 people who were slowly, carefully, learning how to be ordinary to each other. She was telling him about a supplier problem, a flower broker she'd been using for 3 years who had begun delivering inconsistent product and hadn't been responsive to her feedback, and she needed to decide whether to find a replacement or give him one more conversation. She was working through it the way she worked through problems, methodically, out loud, not looking for his input so much as thinking in his presence. He was watching her hands. She talked with her hands in small ways. Nothing theatrical, just small adjustments, the occasional gesture that illustrated the point. He had forgotten this about her, or had not remembered it clearly enough, and now he remembered it the way you remember things about someone when you've had enough time with them again that you've moved past the hyper-awareness of early reunion into something more settled. She finished her thought about the broker, looked up, found him watching her. "What?" she said. He reached into his jacket pocket. He put the ring on the table between them. She looked at it. He watched her look at it. The oval bezel, the thin hammered band, the small nick on the left side. She knew every detail of it. She'd been wearing it around her neck for 11 years. Her hand came up from her lap and rested on the table, not touching the ring, just near it. "That's not an engagement ring," he said. "Not right now. I'm not asking you anything tonight." She was quiet. "I just didn't want to keep it in my pocket anymore," he said. "It's been there for 11 years. It belongs on the table between us, where we can both see it." He paused. "It means that I know what I want, somewhere ahead of us. Not now, not soon. But I know, and I wanted you to know I know. That's all." She looked at the ring for a long moment. Then she looked at him. Her eyes were doing the thing they'd done since the beginning. The complex, guarded calculation underneath the surface. The weighing of what was real against what could be trusted. He did not hurry it. He had gotten good, over the last several months, at not hurrying things with her. It was the most important skill he had learned, possibly the most important skill of his life, though the competition for that distinction was not especially rigorous. She reached out. She picked up the ring. She looked at it in her palm. This unremarkable piece of Victorian silver from a pawn shop on Mercer Street, bought with shaking hands by a 23-year-old who had not yet learned how much the world could cost. And something in her face changed in the way it changed very rarely. The deepest, most offended layer of her opening just slightly, just enough. She did not put it on. She closed her fingers around it loosely and set her hand back on the table with the ring inside it. "Okay," she said. One word. Same word she'd been using since the beginning when she'd made a decision she was going to live inside. He reached across the table, put his hand over hers, the ring between her fingers and his palm, and she let him. And the kitchen was quiet around them with the sound of the city coming through the window and the plants on the sill holding their patient, improbable green, and it was enough. It was enough. Outside, the city moved on through the autumn dark, doing what it always did. Indifferent, enormous, running its own accounts. Inside the apartment, a boy slept in his east-facing bedroom without dreams he would remember. And in the kitchen, two people who had been separated by a lie and survived the separation and come back through the damage to this unremarkable Tuesday night sat with their hands together and said nothing else, because there was nothing else that needed to be said. Not tonight. The ring was on the table. The rest would follow.